and again, this is, no pads, right? These are just shirts and shorts, right? He is miles ahead of where he was this time last year. And I would say that, again, take it with a grain of salt, as you will, but I think he's been better and more aggressive than he was even since the end of this past year. And some of it, a lot of it is little things, right? So, yeah, I mean, for the most part, the arm strength and the physical build, it's more or less the same. I mean, he's a little bit trimmer. The ball has a couple more RPMs on it. Deep ball is a little bit flatter, so it's not looking like it's touching the rafters when he throws it up there, right? But for the most part, more or less the same guy. But I think a lot of it is going to be, how does he handle the mental part? That's how he's going to have to stay ahead of everybody, because he doesn't have when a play breaks down, I'm just going to run around for 5 seconds and then go find somebody 60 yards down the field and I'm going to Justin Herbert it. He's not going to do that, right? But little things like in practice one day, he thought he had cover one on one play, like just straight man coverage. And he does a little check with me like, okay, I know what we got here. They threw cover one robber at him. They took away one side of the field. And he was like, okay, fine. Didn't skip a beat, just threw it to the other side. Threw it to the back coming out of the backfield to convert a first down in one of those like 3rd and 7 drills. So I feel like he looks like a dude who has control right now, and that this is his offense. He knows what he's doing. The operation looks smooth. Again though. This is
that's from somebody who's been down there watching.
Yeah, we're talking.
Not just looking like you from afar.
I'm 30,000 feet away.
I mean, we're talking about OTAs and minicamp. I'm a completely level with you on that. I mean, I just think that so far, I mean, he looks like he's taking little steps. We got to see when the pads come on, though, just like last year. Right?
But I would say,
excuse me, steps forword, not steps backward.
Definitely not steps back.
Not regressive steps, progressive steps.
Sorry, that's Greg Honk. He's the host of the show.
We got to see when the real football starts, we'll see. But for now, it's definitely not steps backward.
Captain looked great with a shirt on.
It's definitely, when the real football starts, it's not steps backward. Okay,
Mike Mamula calling into action. So the issue that I think Wiggy and I have, or not to speak for him, but it's not so much Mac that's the reason he's going to regress. It's that how many second-year quarterbacks have that much on their shoulders, where you have basically you're the offensive coordinator. You have your best lineman, the highest rated player according to Pro Football Focus by a mile was Shaq Mason on your team last year, 30th rated player in the entire NFL. Your next highest player was like 92. He's gone, replaced by somebody else. Isaiah Wynn and Trent Brown, injury prone and question mark depending on who you're talking about. Those skill positions compared to the rest of the division are abhorrent. And so I don't see where he's going to have the ability around him to be able to succeed. Tom Brady, greatest player of all time, had far more people around him when he became, before he was who he was. He had Charlie Weiss. He had a guy like Jermaine Wiggins, who was a brilliant route runner, who caught every pass, didn't have much speed. He had a lot of people to support him. I don't see that with Mac Jones.
I mean, these are fair points. I will say one thing with Shaq Mason. So Michael Onwenu actually graded out overall slightly ahead of Shaq Mason when it came to guards. Now, again, that's Pro Football Focus, people with varying amounts of stock in it and stuff like that. But, I mean, you could make the argument based on that, and I think they are making the argument that they are similar enough players where, okay, we were going to be paying Shaq Mason like $6.5–7 million. We'll take Michael Onwenu and put him in there, and he's making, what, $895K?
Right.
So it's like, okay, from a value perspective. But you're right. I mean, in the sense that when you look at Miami and you look at Buffalo, the skill positions are miles better, right? And their big addition was Devontae Parker. Now, I think with that, that's more of a, okay, we found, our ex-receiver, and now we're going to use that to move other guys around. And I can tell you that Nelson Aguilar has been much more visible in the couple days that we've seen him than he was at any point during practices last year, because they are moving him around formations now. Last year, they pigeonholed him almost completely into an outside receiver, and I don't think that was his game. They tried to do that in Philly early on in his career. Wasn't his game. They resurrected him by putting him in the slot. And I see them doing that a bit more now. He's gotten open. He's getting, catches over the middle and running after the catch. I feel like that's what they're going to have to do. But, yeah, in terms of raw skill, I mean, it's not quite there. They're really, really leaning into the complementary football thing. And with a guy like Mac Jones, who doesn't have that outstanding physical ability, that means there's less margin for error.
Right.
Right? So the timing's got to be right. Everybody's got to be exactly where they are supposed to be.
Right.
And when he throws up a 50-50 ball to you, you better win.
Right. Well,
And-
the biggest thing you talked about is the timing, and everybody's got to be exactly where they need to be. And then my view of how things are going to take a step back from are very simple. I asked this question. Are you a better team now than where you were at the end of the season? And I'd say offensively, no. You lost 2 of your starting offensive linemen, and not just Shaq Mason, but you lost Ted Karras, who was just starting the other guard. Your wide receiver position hasn't really upgraded. I mean, we don't know what Devontae Parker's going to be. I mean, he was a decent player in Miami, but he's still not a true number one. So you don't have a true number one wide receiver, so that's going to make it even harder for Mac. The other part of it is you lost the most important piece of all of this that made Mac Jones successful last year, and that was your offensive play caller in Josh McDaniels. And so just with that in itself, you have a new offensive play caller that has no experience. He's never called a play in his life for offense before, whether that's Matt Patricia or Joe Judge. So there are going to be growing pains in that. So that's where it's about Mac taking a step back. It's not so much, and I'm with Curtis's physical ability, but it's what's around him.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, for me, it is I can't sit up here and try to sugarcoat this and say I feel like I've seen some people say, oh yeah, like should we be sneaky confident in like Matt Patricia or Joe Judge? And I'm like, I don't think that's possible. Like I don't think I can do that. So I'm with you on that in terms of he has to, and they're really banking on him making that step. Right, that this is going to be
Mac.
like, yes,
mentally,
Matt,
mentally being that the physical is what the physical is with him.
Yeah,
Although
and
you said it's
it
getting a little better or whatever,
Yeah.
but as it should. But the mentally, him being that kind of player, like a Tom Brady like mental player, who's going to handle that transition, a lot of it himself.
Exactly. That is how he's going to have to win. And again, it doesn't help that you have, Mac Jones being like, oh yeah, might have to help teach Joe Judge about, his position, right? And people kind of running with that quote, right? Yeah. But I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility that we might look back at the offensive play caller, coordinator, whatever, because I happen to think that Bill Belichick is basically your de facto offensive coordinator now. You could do worse than that. I mean, he's around the huddle.
Yeah,
I mean,
but who's going to babysit his son now? Like he was doing that with the defense last year. You can't do both.
And that's going to be the thing, right?
Yeah.
Now he is going to have to, if he spends more time with the offense, he's got to let the defense part go. And it's like, okay, well, y'all got to handle this because I got to be over here now. So he's, maybe stretching himself a little thin.
Right.
But yeah, I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility we could look back on that as being overblown. But I mean, yeah, a lot of things got to go right.
But
It's
why
true.
is he adding more things to his plate as he ages and as the players require his attention more? Like, I would get this if you had one side of the ball where you had a bunch of veterans who were all pretty well established, knew the offense, were real like leaders on the coaches on the team, dating back to when you had, those early 2000s teams. This team, it seems like such a self-inflicted wound not to hire a talented coordinator to handle the offense when you let Josh McDaniels go. McDaniels was the highest paid person on that staff by a mile, with $4 million a year reportedly, according to Fourier and Reese and others. So you lose.
I just don't think he could find. I don't think he could find one that he liked.
Well,
so you bring in 2 people that have never coached on offense?
Because it's a I'm going to do it myself kind of thing. I mean,
right. That seems like a mistake.
Yes.
Well, and it very well might be. Now, I think that the theory I'm operating under, and I've kind of floated this with a bunch of people, right, and I don't think maybe it's that off the wall, is that, yeah, there were talented offensive coordinators out there, but he didn't make them. They didn't come up here.
Right, he couldn't control them.
And well, control is one part of it. The other part, I think, is continuity, because you were just talking about this, right? You lose an offensive coordinator that's been here for more than a decade, right? He built this offense with Tom Brady, and it's funny when you're talking about the other day you're talking about maybe shorten things up, cutting off a couple of terms and tags, right? Talking with Devin McCourty, right? In his interview, he said something like, yeah, I don't really know anything about offensive football, but I used to stand over Josh McDaniels' shoulder sometimes and look at his call sheet and be like, why you gotta say all this to call one play, right? And so I think this is kind of like an opportunity like, look, Tom Brady's gone.
Right.
Josh McDaniels is gone. Why are we doing all this then? And so maybe we streamline a thing. But in order to keep as much continuity, again, I'm trying to put myself in the frame of mind of where this is coming from. Where this is coming from. But maybe it's about continuity. Like, look, in the end, this is my system, and I will tell them how to do it because they know how I like things done, as opposed to let's bring in Adam Gase, who's never worked here and is maybe going to want to do a bunch of his own things. And then I'm gonna have to have that friction.
But when you dumb it down, now what you've done is because when Devin looks over his shoulder and goes, "Oh, why do they have to say all this? Why is it so elaborate?" When you now dumb it down, what you do is you make the offense simplistic, not just for the offensive players, but guess what? The defense to know what you're doing. And so when you had a position, and I meant to bring this up to Greg yesterday, it would be like Greg has been in radio for 40 years. He's been doing
32 or
all right,
something
32
like that.
years.
Slow down.
32 years.
I'm only 55 and I look 40. But go ahead. What?
He's been in radio a long time. Now, Curtis and I have kind of been beside, and, we have not been in radio as long as him, but we know a little bit of it.
I learned everything from Wiggy.
But when Curtis sits in the driver's seat, it's much different versus I've never sat in the driver's seat. So imagine you have two guys in Joe Judge and Matt Patricia who have never ran an offense. And you are now telling them with a sophomore or a second-year quarterback, it's not like they have Tom Brady, and Brady can go, you know what, don't worry about it like he does in Tampa. I know what I'm doing here. You have a guy in Mac Jones who needs that mentor to teach him about offense. You don't have that, and you're now depending on two guys that have very, very little offensive coaching experience.
And then I would say also don't forget about Brian Hoyer because,
My man.
Joe Judge is the quarterback's coach. I feel like they're going to lean a lot on Brian Hoyer because nobody now that Josh McDaniels is gone, no one else has more experience aside from Bill Belichick in this offense as Brian Hoyer does. And you could see it at practice.
Right.
He's over here taking Tyquan Thornton aside and being like, look, this is how you stem this route right here. This is how you break when you do this certain route combination, right? He's also helping coach up these
But you don't
kids.
see that as an issue? That you now have.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't see it as an issue.
That's my point. So I don't understand how people say
Brian Hoyer's a brilliant guy to have to show what not to do. Because maybe Cam Newton watched Hoyer, and that's why he started throwing at guys' feet.
From a physical standpoint, sure.
No, I'm just
but I think,
kidding
in terms of a mental
No,
standpoint.
I get what you're saying, but that's where I see the regression coming from is because Mac has to rely on all these guys. Like Brian Hoyer doesn't have any coaching experience.
Yeah.
And so now he has
He has
to
a lot of bench experience.
Side note, if Cam Newton ends up with a job somewhere, do you see him regressing? Or is it possible
No,
for
I
him
think
to
he can
regress?
only go up.
Is it possible for him to regress any farther? All right. Listen, thanks for coming in.
Yeah. Good stuff.
WEEI.com. You can read. You're there. You're down there. You're living there down at Gillette, and so you can read Khari at WEEI.com. We'll talk to you as we get closer to the season and all season long.
Yes, sirs.
All right.
Anytime.
All right.